not real. Why am I getting this so strong? And I went on and I just put some keywords in, and not expecting anything, to be honest, and up came a book called Who Built the Moon by two researchers who've written other books as well, looking at the extraordinary anomalies in the moon and to the moon, and pointing out that really when you put it all together, it has to be a non-natural phenomena. And this sort of information then started coming from many other different angles. I'd come across other books, I'd come across articles and what have you, and I'd meet people. And then I came across these two Russian scientists from the Soviet Academy of Science who wrote an article, a very lengthy and comprehensive article, in Sputnik magazine in the 1970s, saying the moon is a hollowed-out planetoid. It's a construct by an advanced, technologically advanced non-human race. And when you start looking at these various questions about the moon, it's extraordinary. You know, we're born and we look at the world as it is when, you know, we become conscious in the world. And we kind of take things for granted. Well, this is how it is, isn't it? But when you start to ask questions, you realize actually how much or how little you knew about something you'd taken for granted. So we look at the moon, and the moon comes out at night and all the rest of it. It goes through its phases and all, what have you. And, of course, it's the moon. It's always been there. Well, when you start looking at it in a different light, you find that there are so many questions about it that point to the fact that there's so much more to know than we currently do. These authors of Who Built the Moon, they said the moon is bigger than it should be, apparently older than it should be, and much lighter in mass than it should be. It occupies an unlikely orbit and is so extraordinary that all existing explanations for its presence are fraught with difficulties, and none of them could be considered remotely watertight. The thing is that science has not a clue how the moon got there. What you see with science all the time, and I research a lot of this, so I see it constantly. A scientist will have a theory about how something is or how something happened. And then, after a while, that theory morphs into scientific fact. But then when you go back, it's a theory. And it doesn't work either. For instance, they say the moon was formed when a Mars-sized type planet hit the Earth, a great chunk of the Earth broke off, and it became the moon. And they call it the whack theory. But then when the science and physics of that didn't work out, they came up with the double whack theory. And that is that this Mars-type planet whacked the Earth and then came back and had another smack. It's like, oh, I'll give you one, I'll come back and give you another. And the fact is they have no idea how the moon came into existence. There was a Russian professor of biochemistry, Isaac Asimov, who did a lot of study with regard to the moon, and this was his summary. We cannot help but come to the conclusion that the moon by rights ought not to be there. The fact that it is one of those strokes of luck almost too good to accept. Small planets such as Earth with weak gravitational fields might well lack satellites. In general, then, when a planet does have satellites, those satellites are much smaller than the planet itself. Therefore, he said, even if the Earth has a satellite, there would be every reason to suspect that at best it would be a tiny world, perhaps 30 miles in diameter. But that is not so. Earth not only has a satellite, but it is a giant satellite, 2,160 miles in diameter. How is it then that tiny Earth has one? Amazing. Another a scientist, a guy called Erwin Shapiro of the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, said, looking at all the anomalies and unanswerable questions with regard to the moon, he said the best explanation for the moon is observational error. It doesn't actually exist. And so I put all this together in the book, and much more besides, to point out that, you know, the evidence is there for the moon not being a natural phenomenon that we think it is. And actually, if you want to put it in simple terms, it's a gigantic, what people might call spaceship. But, you know, it's not like the space shuttle. This is technology and knowledge and understanding of reality light years ahead of where we are. And when I then picked up the phone, I spoke to my great friend Credo Mutwa. And Credo Mutwa is a very, very famous and renowned shaman in the Zulu nation in South Africa. And he is the official historian of the Zulu nation. He's the carrier of the knowledge, the ancient knowledge, if you like. And I have found over the years that the Zulu legends, the Zulu, quote, myths, are incredibly accurate if you break down the symbolism into what they're really saying. And I called Credo Mutwa, and I said to him, not that I've found all this stuff about the moon, you know, what do you think? I simply said to him, Credo, tell me any Zulu legends about the moon. Are there any? What do they say? And he said that immediately that the legends say that the moon was brought here hundreds of generations ago by two brothers, Wawani and Mpanku. Now, these break down, of course, these are other names for what the Sumerians used to call Enlil and Enki of the non-human race they record in their ancient tablets called the Anunnaki. And he said that these two brothers, Credo, Wawani and Mpanku, were leaders of a reptilian race. They were known as the Water Brothers and had, he quotes, scaly skin like a fish. Now, Enki, in the Sumerian text, is known as associated very much with water, as a water god. And the Zulu legends say that Wawani and Mpanku stole the moon in the form of an egg from the great fire dragon. And listen to this, emptied out the yolk until it was hollow.
Oh, wow.
They then rolled the moon across the sky to the earth, and when it arrived, it caused cataclysmic events on the planet because, of course, we are held as a planet in our angle of spin, if you like, by influence from the moon. Now, interestingly, I also go into detail in the book. He talks about the emptying out the yolk of the symbolic moon egg. Well, when you look at the scientific stuff again, you find that there is tremendous evidence that the moon is actually hollow. And one of the things that has been pointed out by some scientists is that the moon is inside out. That's one of the quotes that I use in the book. The moon is inside out because what's on the surface should be inside. And again, when you look at the reaction of the moon when it's been hit by very powerful missiles, if you like, of various kinds, including ones produced by NASA and to impact the moon reacts as if it's hollow. For instance, scientists have said that when the moon was hit by one massive blow, that it wobbled in such a precise way, quote, almost as though it had gigantic hydraulic damper struts inside it. They say, rang like a bell or reacted like a gong. You know, in other words, that massive amounts of the moon are hollow. And those Zulu legends talk about the moon being broken up into compartments, and each compartment has a different job to do, carries different kinds of genetics and what have you. And the moon has been used to hijack the Earth and manipulate us. And the next stage of it, which I go into in the book in detail in a chapter called The Moon Matrix, I talk about how there was genetic manipulation, which is